I'm Tom King. I work for the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, or OCCRP, or if you prefer, OCCRP. We are an investigative journalism organisation working globally to reveal particularly cross-border cases of organised crime and corruption. I tweet at Tall Geeky Chap. It's very British. Okay, first slide then. Anyone know who this is? Feel free to shout out. Okay, this is a guy called Hernan Cortés. He was around in the 15th and 16th centuries. He was a Spanish conquistador. And he said this: "We Spaniards know a sickness of the heart that only gold can cure." It's a pretty great quote. And he was well known particularly for taking the gold of the Aztecs. Now, why am I talking about Hernan Cortés, an obscure historical figure, or relatively obscure? Neil Young wrote a great song about him, by the way, called Cortés the Killer. I recommend it. Why am I talking about him? Well, because there's a big problem in the world today, and it's basically going unnoticed. And that is this, that we are seeing $1 trillion a year taken out of developing economies. It's the biggest transfer of wealth from the developing world to the developed world since the days of Cortés. That has a severe human cost. There's about 3.6 million humans dying every year as a result of that transfer. And where that money goes is not into your public services, it's not into infrastructure or education or health in your own countries. It's into the shadow economy. And recent estimates place the shadow economy at around 8 to 15% of the entire world economy, and growing. Now, one of the things we hear in our political discourse a lot is discussions of international aid, development aid. Does anyone know, want to guess, throw out a guess as to how much international development aid was sent to the developing world last year, roughly? 100 billion, around that? Okay, so I think it was about 136 billion last year. So you can see, we're bailing out the Titanic with a teaspoon. As long as this transfer continues, the aid that we send is not so much aid as a very, very pathetic compensation payment. Now, how is this happening? I want to suggest to you that the reason this is happening is because we are complicit in silence and we are complicit in secrecy. The world economy has been globalized and world politics has been globalized, but our ability to hold people accountable has not been. What's the result of that? Well, here are some animals. On the left is a polar bear. That second one is a saltwater crocodile. This is a great white shark. And this is Vladimir Putin. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to what unites those four things? Apex predators, exactly. Perfect. Apex predators have no natural enemy. Now, why do I say this? I say this because, as I said, politics, money, power, influence are globalized. And that means that national jurisdictions have no ability to track the flow of money, drugs, people, or weapons. The biggest problem that we face in the world, I suggest, is that we cannot counteract people who know how to operate in that environment. And organized crime and corruption figures know how to operate in that environment better than anyone else. They are the most collaborative, the most innovative, the most networked people that we come across in life. And you're seeing the effects of this. So why does this matter? Well, in various countries around the world, we're beginning to see what that means in national terms. It bleeds into your national politics, into your national society. So here's some examples. Brazil and Russia, we think we know what that looks like. In my own country, the UK, we had the Brexit referendum last year. That was dominated by lies, dominated by deceit, dominated by influence from the outside as well. Increasingly, it's fairly clear that Russia had a part to play in that referendum. And obviously, the US itself, now far beyond doubt, influenced and indeed co-opted by Russia in last year's election. What can we do about it? Well, the organization I work for is, as I said, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, but there are many other organizations doing similar type of work at the moment. And the reason for that is this: we have to globalize accountability organizations in order to counteract this supranational threat. And these are just a few examples of projects that have been done to reveal the extent of these networks. The Panama Papers last year, how many people read those stories? Quite a few, good. The other ones, I suspect, didn't make it to the US. Okay, but the Russian laundromat was published in March. That was about a $20 billion money laundering network out of Russia that spanned the globe. It actually, the $20 billion we identified, and we think there was actually $80 billion laundered, went through 96 countries and 732 banks. This is really pervasive. I can't describe to you how pervasive these networks are. This one on the left, bottom left, Evicted and Abandoned, that was a huge ICIJ project on the World Bank, looking at the $50 billion of World Bank projects that displaced people. And the one on the bottom right was about the president's daughter. And let me see if this sounds familiar to you. The Uzbekistan president, Karimov, his daughter Gulnara took $1 billion of bribes from Western telecoms companies who wanted to operate in Uzbekistan. Fortunately, our investigation revealed that, and those telecoms companies ended paying $2.2 billion in fines to the US and Dutch governments. The cost of that investigation to us was $80,000. So on a very tiny budget, we can actually reintroduce accountability. But to put that in perspective, my organization's entire budget is $2.5 million a year. And we are the most prolific organization that does this kind of work in the world. So if you're wondering why, when you look at the state of things in the US or in the UK or in other Western democracies that have recently been undergoing disinformation attacks or what we might call fake news, investment in this kind of work is parlous, to say the least. One final point on that disinformation issue, and this is where my original title comes in. I want to encourage you to think about information like we maybe would have thought about water 150 years ago. So imagine you live 150 years ago and the water system is completely untrustworthy. And there's maybe a company or a guy who comes along to you and says, hey, I've got a great new system for delivering water to your house. It's going to be completely free. You can have as much water as you like. What I won't tell you is what I'm going to put in with the water. There might be industrial waste in there. There might be some raw sewage. There might be animal excrement. I don't know. Could be anything. But that's how the water's going to be delivered from now on, and that's how it's going to be. And I want to suggest to you, very simply, where we are now with information is where we were then with water. And I want to encourage everyone to find ways of stop drinking the raw sewage. I want to encourage everyone to find those organizations, to find those publishers, to find those mechanisms that are actually trustworthy. And if they don't exist, and mostly they don't actually exist, to think about ways that we can build them. That's what I intend to do, and thank you for your time.